Deputy Benjamin Trebian, last name Trebian.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a patrol deputy with St. Croix County.
How long have you been a law enforcement officer?
About 4.5 years.
What are your general duties as a patrol officer?
Patrol, take calls, respond to calls.
Were you on duty back on July 30th of 2022?
I was.
Were you one of the many officers that got dispatched to the stabbings on the Apple River in Somerset?
I was.
What was the information you were given initially?
I was given that there was multiple people that were stabbed on the river. I was sent a photo, was asked to respond to an area and set up a perimeter.
What was the photo you were sent?
Male, 50s, he was described as Russian, wearing camo swim trunks.
Who was supposedly the photo of?
Nicolae Miu, or the suspect in the stabbing.
Thank you. Were you given a specific assignment in relation to your response?
I was just tasked with responding to perimeter. I set up on near I and 170th and was moving there.
All right. At some point, did you get called away from where you were trying to establish a perimeter?
Yes.
And before we move on, when you say you're establishing a perimeter, what are you trying to do?
Just contain the suspect into a certain area.
At that point, had a suspect been located?
Not at that point.
At some point, you moved away from where you were assigned to establish a perimeter?
Yes.
Where'd you go?
I responded. We were advised that possible suspect was seen at the tubing exit. I responded to corner of Sunrise and Parent Street in Somerset, where I then ran down to the tubing exit.
All right. Were other law enforcement officers there by the time you arrived?
Yes.
Were you wearing a body camera that day?
I was.
Were you recording your actions at that time?
Yes.
I can approach the witness, Judge.
Yes, you may.
Deputy, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 47. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
It's my body cam flash drive.
Is it labeled?
Yes.
And what's the label say?
Trebian AC video.
That's your name?
Yep.
All right. Move for admission of 47 and the desk to publish.
Any objections to 47?
No, Judge.
It is received. Go ahead and play the persons you wish to show.
This particular segment, Judge, is the whole video. It's less than 2 minutes. We'll start from the beginning and play to the end.
Tell us when you're ready.
It's 2 minutes, 8 seconds, Judge. We're starting right at the beginning. We're ready.
Camera recording started.
Our current witness says that the male appears to be wearing a camel-colored shirt.
Yes. I'm sorry, yeah. No,
You're just being detained at this point, okay?
Yes.
What do we check? Checking, only checking.
D6 dispatch, believe we have the suspect detained. I believe we have him detained at the same.
No weapons or nothing like that.
Number 336 has the
Don't
possible
even have my
suspect
shoes on.
detained
Okay.
at 1649. Everybody hold where they're at. We need a photo so we can confirm this.
I got it.
I'm coming up on across the bridge right now.
Like I said, you're just being detained at this point, okay, boss?
Okay.
I got a photo on my phone. I'll be there in a second.
Yeah. Chain matches. Shorts.
What's
her name?
Nick.
Nick what?
Nick Miu.
Okay.
Why?
Bring him over my...
What did they do?
This way.
Bring over my quad. He's not double locked at this point.
All right, we'll worry about it over here.
He's got a silver chain.
It matches.
On him. Silver blockchain.
Same shorts.
Yes. So. Let me double lock this quick.
Number.
Like I said, sir, you're just detained at this point, okay? We'll explain anything in a second here.
The same as well.
You got some pretty good markings on his hand, too.
Alright.
Someone wants to take a picture of that? Yeah, we're on his thumb.
Maybe 100.
Deputy, was that your body cam, or a portion of your body cam from that day?
Yes.
When you made contact with Mr. Miu at the park, did his clothing match what his clothing was in the photo you were sent of the suspect you were looking for?
In the photo, he was just wearing shorts at the time. And the video there, he's wearing a camo button-down shirt. He's got glasses and a hat on.
When he was first detained, did you know for sure that he was the person you were looking for?
Not initially when I observed him, but once we pulled up the photos and confirmed the markings, then we did.
Did you have to remove his hat and his glasses to confirm that?
I believe so, yes.
You indicated in the body cam that he had some markings on his hands.
Yes.
Can you describe those?
Just cuts and nicks on knuckles and on his hands.
Did you take some pictures of those?
I did.
Approach, Judge.
Yes, you may.
Deputy, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 48. Can you tell me what that is?
Pictures of Mr. Miu's hands that I took.
How many pages?
2.
How many actual photographs?
2.
Is that what you described as the markings that were on his hands?
Yes.
Are those the photos you took that day?
Yes.
Move for admission of Exhibit 48.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
48 is received.
Ask for permission to publish.
Yes, you may.
I'll do it on the Calmo.
Try, oh, clear it, we'll start again.
I can,
No, that's working now.
I'll say for the record, that's page 1 of the exhibit. This is page 2. After Mr. Miu was taken into custody, did you have any more involvement in this case that day?
Once he was taken into custody, I then searched his person, didn't locate anything on his person. I also assisted with canine search of the area of where the stabbing took place, and evidence collection at that point down by the river there.
Right. Nothing further.
Mr. Nelson?
I want to ask you some questions of there at Village Park, okay?
Yep.
Village Park is where the exit is for the river, correct?
Yes.
Pretty much everyone who gets on the river gets off at Village Park, right?
Yes.
today there, or on this day, there was some exceptions that people were diverted over to another place to exit, correct?
I don't recall if there was a secondary point to exit.
And I wasn't trying, like, there was an ambulance that came, people exited where the ambulance was.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes,
There was a small group of people that exited there. Fair to say?
yes,
When I say small, it might be multiple groups, but it's like less than 50 people. Agreed?
maybe.
Okay. Were you there at that point where the bridge goes over, Highway 35, 64 goes over, and where they brought the people with injuries out? Were you there ever?
Not later after, with helping with evidence collection.
Okay, but not until, by that time, I would imagine the people that had exited in that place were essentially had gone. Fair to say?
Probably.
Okay. You didn't observe them at least, correct?
I did not, no.
You don't have a memory of it at least?
No.
So at the exit at the Village Park, you'd gotten a description of the man that you were looking for, correct?
Correct.
And it was based upon this photo that somebody had provided and distributed around, correct?
Correct.
And you know that that photo may have also been distributed to some citizens, some non-law enforcement people, for all you knew, correct?
I can't say that for certain.
Okay. Do you have knowledge of that now?
No, not until you said that.
Okay. And in addition to the photo, you had somebody's physical description, correct?
Yes,
And when you get a physical description, you, in that position, you have, you rely on it, correct?
yes,
It may or may not be accurate, right?
potentially,
Yeah. It may or may not be helpful, correct?
possibly.
You're not there to judge the accuracy of it, you're just, you got that information and you're gonna process it for whatever value it's worth, right?
Correct.
So in this situation, somebody said, he looks Russian, correct?
Correct.
What does a Russian look like?
Objection, Your Honor. Sustained.
Was that helpful to you in any manner?
Not particularly.
Okay. When you were there at the Village Park, do you gain knowledge that there was a man with a bat looking for Mr. Miu?
I remember hearing about that, yes.
Yeah. And in fact, that man with the bat had confronted Mr. Miu just before the arrest, as far as you know. Is that right?
Objection, foundation.
Sustained.
Do you know?
I do not recall if he ever approached him.
Okay. Were your handcuffs placed on Mr. Miu?
I did not place handcuffs, but I was there, yes.
Somebody else placed the handcuffs on him?
Yes.
Their other set?
I'm sorry, what, can you repeat?
Somebody else's set of handcuffs were put on Mr. Miu?
Yes,
At some point, were you there to see that pair of handcuffs taken off and another pair of handcuffs put on him?
yes,
And during that exchange, from Mr. Miu's one set of handcuffs being taken on to another set of handcuffs being taken on, do you remember the talk at that point in the presence of Mr. Miu about there's a guy looking for walking around with a bat? Do you remember that?
maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what we were talking about at that time, but
Do you remember that during one of the body cams?
yeah, I remember hearing about it.
Okay. And do you remember how Mr. Miu reacted in your presence when he heard that there was a man on the river looking for him with a body cam? Do you remember his look of surprise?
I do not know.
Do you remember his look of shock?
No, I
Do you remember his look of fear?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. So were you the person that essentially, for lack of a better term, identified Mr. Miu, like, we think it's him?
We saw him, yes, and then looking at the photo that we were sent, we confirmed it, yes.
Okay, and I understand you using the word "we." You're the one here talking, so I'm not going to use the "we." I'm just talking about you. Agreed?
Yes,
You saw him, and you're like, I think that's the guy.
correct.
And at the time that you saw him. Can I get exhibits? I think it's 110 and 111, maybe 112. All of those, if I could. Thank you. When you saw Mr. Miu, he had on a hat, is that right?
Yes.
Do you know if when he started the day on that trip, he had a hat on?
I do not.
When you saw Mr. Miu, you saw him with glasses on, correct?
Sunglasses, yes.
Do you know if when he started that trip, he had sunglasses on?
I do not.
When you saw Mr. Miu, he had a shirt on, correct?
Correct.
Do you know if when he started that trip, he had his shirt on?
I do not.
Did you ever, he also had shorts on?
Yes.
Do you know if when he started the trip, he had shorts on?
I don't for sure, but I'd assume
Okay.
so.
And when you saw him, he had a necklace on, correct?
Yes.
Do you know if when he started the trip, he had the necklace on?
I don't.
And then when you saw him, he had shoes on, correct?
Yeah, sandals.
And do you know if he started the trip with those shoes on?
I do not.
Essentially, those are the 6 things that you saw that he was wearing at the end of the trip when you saw him, correct?
Correct.
You don't know what of those 6 things he was wearing at the beginning, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
When you saw him, you saw the necklace and the shorts. I'm sorry, the picture showed him with necklace and shorts, correct?
Correct.
You were still able to say, when you saw him wearing all 6 of the items, you were still able to say, I think that's the guy, correct?
Yes.
And when you essentially, you and other law enforcement officers said something along the lines of, come with us, right? You verbally told the person who we now know as Mr. Miu to like, stop, something along those lines? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And when he was given that verbal command, he complied, correct?
Yes.
He was very, as we saw through it there, very cooperative, correct?
Yes.
The first words out of his mouth were something like, I'm sorry, something like that?
I don't recall. That's what it was.
And then you had close contact with him, correct?
Yes.
And you're a trained police officer, you're trying to both make sure everybody's safe as well as at some point maybe do some investigation, collect evidence, correct?
Yes.
It's all going on at the same time, right?
Yes.
So at some point during that, you make observations of his hands, correct?
Yes.
And when you made those observations, you made a point to document it, correct?
Yes.
Because that's what police do, right?
Yeah.
When they see evidence, they make sure they document it, correct?
Yes.
Can you imagine a world in which if you saw a mark on his hands, you wouldn't take a photo?
Objection, Your Honor, is relevant.
Sustained.
You took a photo of his hands.
Yes.
Why?
Evidence of potential evidence of crime.
You would agree the marks on his hands, you don't know how he got those, right?
I do not know.
They would be consistent with somebody perhaps falling in the river and having their hands hit the bottom of the river.
Objection, Your Honor, foundation irrelevant.
Sustained on foundation.
Have you seen people with marks on their hands before?
Yes.
Have you seen people fall in the river before?
Yes.
You've seen people's hands hit rocks and dirt and ground before?
Yes.
Would you say what you observed on his hands are consistent with someone obtaining those marks from falling in the river and having their hand hit rocks and dirt and ground?
Potentially.
As a law enforcement officer, I imagine you have times where you deal with people who have drank alcohol, correct?
Yes.
And sometimes that's relevant evidence that you want to, again, document, correct?
Yes.
Some of those things that you would document would be something that you smell, right?
Yes.
Or some of the things that you document might be the speech that you hear that somebody says, correct?
Yes.
Because if somebody's intoxicated, they often smell of alcohol, correct?
Yes.
If somebody's intoxicated, they often have slurred speech, correct?
Yes.
When you notice those things, you might document them in a report, correct?
Yes.
And then you might do further investigation to try to collect additional information to confirm your observations, right?
Yes.
That might be simply to ask somebody a question, right?
Yes.
Might be to give somebody a chemical test, correct?
Objection,
Yes.
Your Honor, irrelevant.
It's very relevant.
Overruled. But can we get to the point?
Yep. And if you have that observation, sometimes you don't only document it, you might give it on to somebody else that you're working with, correct?
Yes.
And in this case, you passed none of that information on to anybody else. Agreed?
Agreed.
And you didn't document anything regarding any particular smell of alcohol or signs of intoxication or alcohol use, correct?
I did not know.
And you didn't document those because when you were in close contact with Mr. Miu, you had no evidence, no reason to believe that he'd been consuming alcohol to the point that it would have been relevant evidence for you to collect, right?
My contact with him, I didn't notice any signs.
Sure. But you were certainly, and appropriately so, in your role as a law enforcement officer, you were right there next to him, correct?
Correct?
For at least several minutes, correct?
Yes.
That's all.
Mr. Smestad?
Deputy, was part of the other information you had, in addition to what he looked like on the river, the picture, were you told whether he was alone or in a group?
I don't recall that.
When you made contact with him at the village park, was he with other folks?
Yes.
How many?
Roughly 12 to 15 maybe.
Had you ever been given information to look for a group of 12 to 15 people that he might be in it?
Not that I recall.
Is it fair to say there was a number of law enforcement officers located at Village Park when Mr. Miu came up from the beach?
Yes.
Did you see him approach any law enforcement officers?
I did not, no.
Did you see officers approach him?
When we approached him, yes.
This is in a situation where you surrendered?
Yes.
Did you, once he was detained, Mr. Nelson had asked you some questions about his, I guess, his expression. Do you remember any shocked expression on his face?
I do not know.
Do you remember, what do you remember about what his face looked like?
That he was just kind of in a trance, didn't really say anything. I just remember him saying his name, and when he was told that he was detained, he said yes, and kind of in a trance-like state almost.
Nothing further.
Mr. Nelson?
Your experience as a law enforcement officer, I imagine you've dealt with victims in the past, correct?
Yes.
Victims of violent crime, correct?
Yes.
Sometimes when you've dealt with victims of violent crime, you've seen them in ways that you observe to be expressions of shock, right?
Yes.
Not like shock as in surprise, but just like shock as in trauma, correct?
Correct.
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled.
And sometimes in those observations that you've seen of people who have been victims of violent crime, that can be expressed in a manner of like a trance-like state, correct?
Potentially, yes.
And that's what you saw from Mr. Miu was consistent with that shock-like trauma, correct?
Shock or something similar.
That's all.
Thank you, Deputy. You may step down.